fabulous artists. So today I'm going to share a project with you inspired by this book, Swatch, The Girl Who Loved Color. I love this book because it is so colorful, and it's about a girl who tries to tame these colors, but they just can't be tamed. So today what you're going to want for our project is you're going to want pencil, ruler, paper. I recommend to have a little bit of a heavier paper, so a construction paper heavy or even heavier, like about a 60 or 90 weight piece of paper. If you have watercolor paper, that would be ideal. But if you don't have that, another thing that's really fun to try this on is even a paper towel. So anything that's going to really absorb water really well. So ruler, paper. I have markers. If you have markers at home, these are what you can use to add the color. If you don't have markers, that's okay. You could use food coloring. Otherwise, watercolor also is a good thing that we can use today. We're going to need some water, and then if you do have a paintbrush at home, you can use that as well. If you don't have a paintbrush, that's okay too, because we can even use our fingers. So we're going to get started. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to clear this up, and I'll show you how we're going to prepare our paper. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to divide our paper into 4 sections. If you are using paper towel or something other than paper, you could just use 4 pieces of paper towel, just however you want. We're going to be creating 4 different pieces of artwork today. So this is 11 inches, so I'm going to just mark it 11.5 so I know where to put my ruler, and I'm not really too worried if it's not perfect. And this is probably 8.5, so I'm going to go 4.25 and draw another line, just so I have 4 areas that I'm going to create 4 different images. Just because we're going to be playing a little bit with color today, we want a lot of opportunities to do that. So I have now 4 areas where we're going to be creating some beautiful pieces. So the first area that I'm going to show you is I'm going to be just using traditional watercolor and a paintbrush and water. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to do a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to go ahead and take my water. So all I have on my brush right now is water, and I'm just going to be getting an area completely wet with water. And I kind of want it to be random, and I don't want to get the entire first square here wet, but just parts of it. So one of the things I love about watercolor and just water mediums in general is they are kind of their own wild beasts. They a lot of times like to take on their own ideas, so they're very fun to work with. So I think with this first one I will do, let's do yellow. So I'm going to go ahead, open those watercolors up, and I'm going to get them wet. I'm going to grab some yellow, really make sure I'm getting it nice and wet, getting a lot of pigment on my brush. And I'm just going to start dropping in some yellow where I've already added water. So again, if you don't have a brush, you can do this with your finger and then just drop in colors, depending on if you're using watercolor or food coloring, and I'll show you how to use those other forms of color today too. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab a little bit of a different yellow and pop that down. So you're going to see the yellow is going to kind of spread and reach and go places where we're not telling it where it's going to go. It's just going to go there, which is fun. All right, so there I have yellow, and again for this one I just use traditional paint, watercolor paints and water. So we'll go ahead and go to the next one. The next one we're going to use some food coloring. I'm going to go ahead and clean out my water because I don't want any of my yellow mixing in with the next colors I'm going to be using. All right, so I'm going to go ahead over to the next square. In the next square I'm going to show you how you can use food coloring. So for this one I think I'm going to do some magenta, and I'm not going to use a paintbrush because not all of you might have a paintbrush at home, and instead I'm just going to use my finger, and I'm just going to drip some water onto my second square. And I'm getting it pretty wet. I want it pretty glossy, so I can really see a lot of shimmer, and I can really tell where that water is sitting on my paper. And I got some good drips going. So you can notice I've kind of like to start in a corner and work my way down into another area. You can do it that way, or you can do it a completely different way. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of food coloring and drop that in. So this is magenta, I think, or this might actually be red. We'll see. Sometimes those caps get mixed up. Yep, this is just red. So maybe I will go grab a little bit of a magenta to add to this too. And now I'm just going to use my finger, and again, if you want, you can just use a piece of paper towel or a washcloth and kind of spread that red around. And you see it's very similar technique to what I have over here, where I just use those watercolor paints. So you can use a lot of different things to create some fun water medium techniques. You can see where I had more of that food coloring, it's going to be a lot more vibrant. One thing that's fun about water mediums is that the more water you add to it, that water acts kind of like a tint, so it makes those colors lighter. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit magenta to this, and then I'll show you another technique. All right, so I have two examples of how you can add some water medium to your 4 squares here. And the last piece here, I'm going to show you how you can use marker. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and get my brush wet. Again, if you don't have a brush, you can use your finger like I demonstrated in that last piece. I think I'm going to go from this side over to this side. So this technique, I'm going to show you how you can just use marker to add some fun colors to your piece. So I just have a normal washable marker here. This is a Crayola, and I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pretend like I'm coloring, but you're gonna notice because I got that area pretty wet, those colors are gonna start to spread out. They're gonna start to seep together and make some pretty cool things happening. So again, if you don't have watercolor or food coloring, this is another way you can get a similar technique on a piece of paper. So I'm going to go ahead and add some blue across this rectangle. Alright, so I just shared with you 3 different ways you can do some really cool water medium pieces at home with some simple supplies. In this last rectangle, I'm just going to kind of combine all of those different techniques and make a really big colorful piece right here. So I'm going to go ahead, pause this, and I'll fast forward this part so we can show you what we're going to be doing next. After I finish this rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and let my entire piece here completely dry, and then we're going to add something fun on top of that. So I finished adding some fun color to my last rectangle here. A couple techniques I did do that I wanted to just show you real quick is I did a tapping technique, which kind of just dropped in little droplets of color, and that created a really fun effect. In addition, really consider the colors you're using here, because again, some of the colors that we mix, like if they're complementary colors, so it means they're across from each other on the color wheel, those are going to make brown colors. So be mindful of the colors that you're putting next to each other, because you don't want it to get too muddy, unless that's a color, that's the look that you want to go with. But just something to consider when you're creating that last rectangle. So now I'm going to go ahead and let this entire piece dry, and we're going to come back and we're going to add something on top of it. All right, my fabulous water media fun color piece here is completely dry, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use some tools to add some details in it. So when we looked at the book Swatch, which inspired our work that we're doing, she is always kind of fun, like writing these colors. She's kind of always in the mingle of all the creation and the color. So if you want, what you can do now is use some fun tools. If you don't have pens or things at home, you can obviously use a pencil, but I'm going to use some pens here, and I'm going to add some figures in the fun paint splashes here. So I think I will add maybe some made up figures, but you could easily add yourself or maybe a friend or a family member and add some little figures in your fun paint explosions here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fast forward this so you can kind of see the creations that I'm going to be making, and then some other things that you can go back and add if you so choose. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this part. I'll speed it up for you so that you can see how I'm going to be adding some figures, kind of dancing in these fun paint splashes here. And then I will show you some other things that you might want to do too. So I have a couple different pens here. I just have an ultra fine Sharpie that you could use. This pen is kind of fun because it has more of a brush tip here. And then another pen I like to use is just a white gel pen that is fun to add different colors with. And then I also have just a Papermate black pen. So those can all create different effects. If you're using water soluble markers like just a black marker, you double make sure that your water pieces here are completely dry. Otherwise those are gonna bleed, just like you saw with when we added marker to our water here. All right, so I'm gonna stop this and show you what we'll be doing. All right, so I kind of went in and I added this little figure, kind of dancing in between the paints. Here she's kind of holding on, sitting over here. Another thing you can do is you can take some fun materials like a black pen, and you can just kind of create some cool designs around some of the splashes. So I'm just gonna go ahead and outline this fun, and then maybe I'm gonna do some fun different patterns inside of it. Maybe I'm gonna incorporate some of that white gel pen. So once you finish with what you have, you can go in and you can add lots of fun designs. You can add those fun figures dancing in between those paint puddles, climbing. You could add lots more figures. Maybe you have your whole class in there. So I can't wait to see what you all end up doing with these fun water mediums, some easy ways to do some watercolor at home and incorporating your own fun takes on this project. Have a great, colorful, art-filled day.